When I gave my grandson a college fund, my daughter-in-law told him I was lying and spent it on a luxury spa retreat. I knew something was wrong the moment Ethan whispered those words through his tears. Mom said you'd show me fake papers. My hands were shaking as I held the bank statements across my kitchen table, the same table where I'd imagined celebrating his high school graduation, where I'd pictured us planning college visits together. But instead of joy, I saw betrayal in my 14-year-old grandson's eyes, and it cut deeper than any knife ever could. The numbers on those papers represented 14 years of careful saving, of skipping vacations and driving my old car longer than I should have, of saying no to myself so I could say yes to his future. Every birthday, every Christmas, every time I'd slipped away from family dinners to transfer another $100 into that account, it had all been for him. But Vanessa had gotten to him first, poisoned his mind against me, and now he thought I was a liar. I'm not a patient woman, never have been. My late husband used to joke that I was like a dog with a bone when someone wronged me, that I couldn't let things go even when I should. It's a flaw I've carried my whole life, this burning need for justice that sometimes tips over into obsession. As a retired accountant, I'd spent 40 years tracking numbers, finding discrepancies, uncovering truths that people tried to hide. That same instinct that made me excellent at my job also made me relentless when I felt betrayed. I've lost friendships over it, pushed family members away when they told me to drop things and move on, but I can't help it. When someone lies to me, when they try to make me look like the villain, something inside me refuses to back down. My son Daniel used to beg me to let small things go, to not make every family disagreement into a federal case. Maybe he was right. Maybe my need to be proven right, to expose every deception, has caused more harm than good over the years. But sitting there watching Ethan cry, watching him believe his mother's lies over my documented truth, I felt that familiar fire ignite in my chest. Ethan, sweetheart, please look at these dates, I said, trying to keep my voice steady even though my heart was pounding. I slid the statements closer to him, pointing at the first entry with a trembling finger. This deposit was made the week you were born. See, April 15th, 14 years ago. I opened this account the day your father called to tell me you'd arrived. He picked up the papers, his young face scrunched in confusion as he scanned the rows of numbers. For a moment I thought I saw belief flickering in his eyes. Then he shook his head and I watched hope die. She said you'd do this. She said you'd try to trick me with papers you made up on your computer. His voice was so small, so convinced of my guilt. Made up, Ethan, these are official bank statements. They have the bank's letterhead, account numbers, everything. How could I fake that? I don't know, he stood up suddenly, the chair scraping against my tile floor. But Mom wouldn't lie to me about this. She said you always make big promises and never follow through. She said you've been doing it my whole life. The accusation hung in the air between us like poison gas. I felt my face flush hot, that terrible mix of rage and hurt that makes my hands shake and my voice go sharp. This was my flaw showing itself again, this inability to stay calm when confronted with injustice. Your mother said that, after everything I've done for this family, after all the times I've helped you both out. She said you'd get mad and try to turn me against her, Ethan said, and I heard Vanessa's words coming out of his mouth like she was a puppet master pulling strings. I forced myself to take a deep breath, to count to 5 like my therapist had taught me years ago when my temper got the best of me, but 5 seconds wasn't enough to cool the fire building in my chest. Ethan, I need you to really look at these statements. Look at every single deposit. Some of them are from my old paychecks before I retired. Some are from my Social Security. I've been putting money aside for you since before you could walk. He was crying harder now, torn between 2 women he loved, and I hated myself for pushing him, but I hated Vanessa more for putting him in this position. I just want to go home, he whispered. That's when I noticed something I'd missed before. In my anger and my desperate need to prove myself right immediately, I'd overlooked a crucial detail on the statements. The account balance at the top of the most recent page. It showed $23.17. The account I'd spent 14 years building, the account that should have had over $48,000 in it, was essentially empty. My vision actually blurred for a second as the realization hit me. Someone had withdrawn all of it. My hands moved without conscious thought, flipping through the statements faster, finding the withdrawal history. There they were, spread across several pages. Large withdrawals starting 2 months ago. 5,000 here, 7,000 there, spread out over 3 weeks like someone was being careful not to trigger any bank alerts. And at the bottom of each withdrawal slip, clear as day, was an authorized signature. Vanessa Marie Calder. Ethan, I said, and my voice came out different now, colder and sharper than I intended. Did your mother take a vacation recently? Maybe somewhere nice, a spa or resort? His face changed, just slightly. How did you know about that? What do you mean, how did I know? Where did she go? She went to Arizona for like a week, some wellness retreat thing. She said she needed it because she's been so stressed about money. He said it defensively, like he was protecting her. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so devastating. Stressed about money, while spending my grandson's college fund on luxury spa treatments. I felt something crack inside me then, something that had been holding back the full force of my anger. Did she tell you how she paid for this retreat? She said she'd been saving up. Why are you asking me this? Ethan's voice rose, getting defensive the way kids do when they sense their parent is being attacked. I stood up and walked to my computer in the corner of the kitchen, my movements jerky with barely controlled rage. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type, but I managed to pull up Vanessa's social media page. I'd looked at it occasionally over the years, the way you do with family, seeing pictures of Ethan growing up, holiday photos, normal life stuff, but I hadn't checked it in months. Now I scrolled back to 2 months ago and there it was. Post after post from the Desert Bloom Wellness Resort. Vanessa in a plush white robe by an infinity pool. Vanessa getting a hot stone massage. Vanessa holding a green juice with the caption, "Finally treating myself to the self-care I deserve." The dates matched perfectly with the withdrawals. "Ethan, come here," I said, and I heard how my voice had gone flat and hard. He approached slowly, warily, like I might explode. When he saw the screen, his face went pale. "That's the money I saved for you, every dollar of it. She didn't save up for this. She stole your future." "No," he said, but it came out weak. "She wouldn't do that." "Look at the dates, Ethan, look at them." I was getting too loud, too intense, letting my anger take over when I should have been gentle with him. This was my flaw again, this inability to control my reaction when someone wronged me. She spent 14 years of my savings on herself, then told you I was lying about the whole thing so you wouldn't question where the money went. "Stop it," Ethan shouted, and suddenly he was the one who was angry, tears streaming down his face. "You're trying to make me hate her, that's what you do. Dad says you always have to make everyone the bad guy except yourself." The words hit me like a slap. Was that what my son thought of me? That I manufactured drama, invented villains? I opened my mouth to defend myself, to explain that this wasn't me being dramatic. This was real theft, real betrayal, but Ethan was already grabbing his jacket and heading for the door. "I'm calling my dad to come get me. I don't want to listen to this anymore." After he left, I sat in my kitchen for 2 hours, staring at those bank statements and social media posts, feeling the familiar fury building inside me like a pressure cooker about to explode. Most people would have confronted Vanessa directly, would have called their son, would have handled this within the family. But I'm not most people. I'm the woman who once spent 3 months building a case against a coworker who'd taken credit for my project. Who'd gathered evidence and emails until I could present an irrefutable argument to management. I'm the woman who tracked down the neighbor who hit my mailbox and drove off, using security camera footage and sheer determination until I had them dead to rights. My husband used to say it was my superpower and my curse, this inability to let injustice slide. So I didn't call Vanessa, I didn't call Daniel. Instead, I did what I do best. I investigated. I opened my laptop and started digging through every transaction, every timestamp, every security log the bank's online system would show me. The withdrawals weren't panicked or desperate. They were methodical, calculated, spread across multiple days and different amounts to avoid triggering automatic fraud alerts. Vanessa hadn't acted on impulse. She'd planned this carefully, probably for weeks or even months. That realization made it worse somehow, made the betrayal more complete. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a desperate mistake. This was premeditated theft from her own son's future. I spent the next week becoming an expert on the Desert Bloom Wellness Resort. I read every review, studied their pricing packages, downloaded their brochures. The 5-day diamond luxury package that Vanessa had posted about cost exactly $7,400, but she'd withdrawn over $48,000 from Ethan's account. Where had the rest gone? Maury digging through her social media gave me partial answers. A new designer purse she'd tagged in a post. New furniture for their living room. A weekend trip to wine country with her girlfriends that she'd captioned, "Spontaneous Adventure." Each post was another knife in my gut, another piece of my grandson's future spent on temporary pleasures and status symbols. But I needed more than social media posts and my own righteous anger. I needed official documentation, the kind of evidence that couldn't be disputed or explained away. I spent hours on the phone with the bank, explaining the situation to increasingly senior representatives. They were sympathetic but limited in what they could tell me due to privacy laws. However, they did confirm that the withdrawals were made with proper authorization, using Vanessa's access to the account as a family member. I'd added her years ago, back when Ethan was little and I'd trusted her, thinking it would be easier if she could access the funds when it came time for college expenses. That decision haunted me now. The bank representative, a kind-sounding woman named Patricia, walked me through the process of filing a formal dispute. In cases like this, where there's evidence of unauthorized use even with authorized access, we can investigate. You'll need to file a police report for theft, and we can freeze any remaining funds and potentially reverse some transactions. There's only $23 left, I told her, hearing the bitterness in my own voice. She cleaned it out. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Hartwell, but with a police report and legal action, you may be able to recover the funds through the courts. Do you have documentation of the intended purpose of the account? I did. I had everything. I kept records of every deposit, written notes about my intentions, even emails to my late husband from years ago discussing the college fund. I was meticulous that way always had been. It was the accountant in me, the need to document everything, to have proof. That same trait that made me obsessive about being right was finally going to serve a useful purpose. But even as I gathered evidence and built my case, doubt crept in during the quiet moments. What would this do to my family? Daniel was already distant with me, had been for years if I was honest with myself. He'd married Vanessa despite my reservations, and every time I'd expressed concern about her spending habits or her tendency to manipulate situations, he'd accused me of being controlling and unable to let him live his own life. If I went after Vanessa publicly, legally, would I lose my son completely? Would Ethan ever forgive me for destroying his mother's reputation and potentially her career? I wrestled with these questions for 3 sleepless nights, packing my house at 2 in the morning, arguing with myself. The reasonable part of me said to handle this privately, to sit down with Daniel and Vanessa like adults and work out a repayment plan. But the other part of me, the louder part, the part that had been screaming since Ethan called me a liar, demanded public accountability. Vanessa had prepared my own grandson not to believe me. She'd poisoned him against me preemptively, knowing that when the truth came out, she'd need him on her side. That level of manipulation, that calculated cruelty, it made my blood boil. On the 4th night, I made my decision. I was going to expose her, but not at a family dinner or in a phone call she could lie her way through. I was going to do it where she couldn't control the narrative, where witnesses would see the truth unfold in real time. Vanessa worked as a regional manager at Serenity Now Wellness Clinic, one of those upscale places that charged $200 for a massage and sold $1,000 meditation packages. The irony wasn't lost on me that she worked somewhere preaching balance and integrity while stealing from her own son. The clinic was her pride and joy, the place where she'd built her professional reputation as a wellness guru and trusted advisor. She posted about it constantly, shared inspirational quotes about honesty and authenticity, cultivated this image of herself as someone who had it all together. That's where I would shatter her carefully constructed facade. That's where everyone would see who she really was. But I needed one more thing to make it work. I needed Ethan to be there, to see the truth for himself in a way he couldn't deny or dismiss. So I called him, and when he answered, his voice was guarded. "Hi, Grandma." "Ethan, I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think about your answer before you say anything." I started, trying to keep my voice gentle despite the adrenaline pumping through my veins. "Do you want to know the truth about what happened to your college fund? The real truth with actual proof that can't be faked?" There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear him breathing, could imagine him wrestling with the same doubts I'd been fighting. Finally, he said, "Yes, but if you're lying to me, Grandma, I don't think I can ever forgive you." "I understand, and I promise you, Ethan, everything I'm about to show you is real. Meet me tomorrow at noon at your mom's work. Can you do that?" "Why there?" "Because your mother needs to explain herself, and she needs to do it somewhere. She can't just walk away or hang up the phone. Will you come?" Another long pause, then quietly, "Okay." The next morning, I spent 2 hours getting ready, which was ridiculous because this wasn't a social event, but I couldn't help myself. I needed to look put together, professional, credible. I wore my navy blue suit, the one I used to wear to important client meetings, and I printed every piece of evidence I had in triplicate. Bank statements, withdrawal slips, screenshots of social media posts with dates and captions clearly visible, the resort's pricing information, everything organized in a thick folder with tabs and labels. My hands were shaking as I organized the papers, and I had to keep stopping to take deep breaths. Was I really going to do this? Was I really going to publicly humiliate my daughter-in-law at her workplace? Yes, because she'd humiliated me first, made my own grandson think I was a liar, and that was unforgivable. This was my flaw talking again. I knew it even as I grabbed my car keys and headed out the door. A better person might have tried one more time to resolve this privately. A better person might have put family harmony above personal vindication. But I've never been good at being the better person when someone wrongs me, and I was way past pretending otherwise. The Serenity Now Wellness Clinic was exactly as pretentious as I'd imagined. All white marble and flowing water features, with soft new age music drifting through speakers hidden in the ceiling. The air smelled like eucalyptus and lavender, and everything was designed to make you feel calm and centered. I felt anything but calm as I walked through the entrance, my heels clicking against the polished floor. Ethan was already there, standing awkwardly near a fountain, looking younger than his 14 years in his hoodie and jeans. When he saw me, his face was a mask of anxiety and hope and fear all mixed together. "You came," I said, and I wanted to hug him, but something in his posture told me he wasn't ready for that. "I want to know the truth," he said simply. Vanessa was at the front desk laughing with two co-workers when we approached. She looked stunning as always, with her highlighted hair perfectly styled and her designer athleisure outfit probably costing more than my monthly grocery budget. When she saw me walking toward her with Ethan beside me and a thick folder in my hands, her smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before she recovered. "Lydia, what are you doing here?" "Ethan, honey, what's going on?" I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I walked straight to the desk and placed the folder down on the marble surface with a solid thunk that made everyone nearby look over. "We need to talk, Vanessa, about Ethan's college fund." Her eyes darted to her coworkers, then back to me, and I saw the calculation happening behind them. How to handle this, how to make me look unreasonable, how to deflect. "This really isn't the time or place, Lydia. I'm at work. Whatever family issue you think we need to discuss can wait until—" "No, it can't wait," I interrupted, and I opened the folder, spreading the documents across her pristine workspace like playing cards. "Because you've been lying to my grandson, and I think he deserves to hear the truth right now." The clinic lobby had gone quiet. Conversations died mid-sentence as people turned to watch what was clearly becoming a confrontation. Vanessa's face flushed red, and I could see her trying to maintain her professional composure. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is completely inappropriate. Ethan, we're leaving." "No, we're not," Ethan said, and his voice was stronger than I expected. "I want to see what she has to say." I pointed to the first set of documents, my finger stabbing at the numbers with more force than necessary. "These are the bank statements for the college fund I opened for Ethan 14 years ago. Every deposit, every month, documented and dated. You can see the account grew to $48,372. Vanessa barely glanced at them. "Those papers don't prove anything. Anyone can print fake bank statements off the internet." "Really?" I flipped to the next section, withdrawal slips that I'd requested from the bank, official documents with the bank's seal and watermark. "Then explain these. 7 withdrawals over 3 weeks, starting March 3rd of this year, totaling $48,355. And look whose signature authorized each withdrawal." I watched the color drain from Vanessa's face as she looked at her own signature, reproduced on official bank documents. Her co-workers had moved closer now, not even pretending not to listen. One of them, an older woman with a name tag that said Marisol Manager, was looking at the papers with growing concern. "That money was a loan," Vanessa said quickly, her voice taking on a defensive edge. "I borrowed it temporarily with every intention of paying it back. Lydia, you're making this into something it's not." "A loan," I repeated, letting skepticism drip from every syllable. "You took over $48,000 from your son's college fund as a loan and didn't tell anyone. Not me, not Daniel, not even Ethan." "I didn't need permission to borrow money from a family account. I'm an authorized user." "And what did you need this loan for?" I asked, sliding the next set of papers forward. Screenshots from her social media, blown up to 8x10 glossy prints. Vanessa in her luxury robe. Vanessa by the infinity pool. Vanessa with her green juice and her caption about self-care. The Desert Bloom Wellness Resort, 5-day diamond luxury package, $7,400. That's what the website says, and that's exactly what you posted about during the same week these withdrawals happened. Vanessa's hand shot out and grabbed the photos, trying to shove them back into the folder, but I'd brought multiple copies for exactly this reason. "You're invading my privacy. You have no right to print my personal social media posts." "They're public posts, Vanessa. You shared them with the world. I'm just connecting the dots between your luxury vacation and my grandson's missing college fund." Ethan had picked up one of the photos, staring at his mother with an expression that broke my heart. "You said you saved up for this trip. You said you'd been putting aside money from your bonuses for 2 years." "I did save up," Vanessa insisted, but her voice had gone shrill now, losing the smooth confidence she usually carried. "The resort was only part of what I spent the money on. The rest was for bills, for things we needed for—" "For new furniture," I interrupted, pulling out more printed social media posts. "For designer bags, for a wine country weekend with your girlfriends. Should I keep going, or do you want to tell Ethan the truth yourself?" Marisol, the manager, stepped forward now, her face stern. "Vanessa, is this true? Did you take money from a child's college fund to pay for personal luxuries?" "It's complicated," Vanessa said, and I could see her scrambling, trying to find a narrative that would make this okay. "Lydia has never understood our financial situation. She doesn't know how hard it's been, how much pressure I'm under." Yes, I took the money, but I was going to pay it back. I just needed some time to breathe, to take care of myself so I could take care of my family. That's what we always say here, right? You can't pour from an empty cup. The manipulation was masterful, I had to give her that, turning it into a story about her own struggles, about self-care and mental health, using the clinic's own philosophy to justify theft. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it. You didn't just take the money, Vanessa. You told Ethan I was lying about the college fund existing at all. You prepared him not to believe me, told him I'd show fake papers, poisoned him against me before he could learn the truth. That's not someone under pressure making a mistake. That's calculated manipulation. Mom, Ethan's voice was small, wounded. Is that true? Did you tell me Grandma was lying? Vanessa's facade finally cracked completely. Instead of answering him, instead of acknowledging what she'd done, she grabbed her purse from under the desk and started backing toward the employee exit. I don't have to stand here and be attacked like this. Lydia, you're vindictive and cruel, and you've always hated me. This is just another one of your attempts to turn my family against me. I'm vindictive. I felt my voice rising, felt my control slipping despite my best efforts. This was happening exactly like I'd feared it would, my anger getting the better of me, making me look like the irrational one. You stole from your own son, and I'm the villain. You made a scene at my workplace. You're trying to humiliate me. Vanessa was almost at the door now, but Marisol moved to block her path. We're not done here, Vanessa, the manager said firmly. These are serious allegations. If you used funds that weren't yours, that speaks to your character and judgment, and I need to understand what happened before you leave this building. I quit, Vanessa shouted, and suddenly she was the one who was crying, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. You want to fire me over family drama? Fine, I quit. I don't need this job or this judgment from people who have no idea what my life is like. She shoved past Marisol and burst through the exit door, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. I stood there with my folder of evidence, my carefully organized proof, feeling simultaneously vindicated and hollow. Was this what I'd wanted? Public exposure, professional consequences, my daughter-in-law fleeing in tears. Yes, if I was being honest with myself, this was exactly what I'd wanted. I'd wanted her to face the consequences of her actions in a way she couldn't lie or manipulate her way out of. But looking at Ethan's devastated face, I wondered if I'd gone too far. Marisol turned to me, her expression unreadable. Mrs. Hartwell, I'm going to need copies of those documents for our HR file. If Vanessa was using stolen funds during her employment here, we need to document this. And regardless of whether she quit or not, I'll be reporting this to the appropriate authorities. Of course, I heard myself say, my voice sounding distant and strange. I handed her a set of copies, watching as she flipped through them with professional efficiency. Around us, the clinic's atmosphere had completely changed. The peaceful, serene environment was now buzzing with whispered conversations and shocked looks. Vanessa's co-workers clustered together, probably discussing how they'd never suspected, how she'd always seemed so together and successful. Ethan hadn't moved. He was still holding that photo of his mother by the pool, staring at it like he could make it mean something different if he looked long enough. She really did it, he whispered. She really took all the money. I wanted to comfort him, to tell him it would be okay, but I didn't know if that was true. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, I said, and I meant it. Even though I'd orchestrated this whole confrontation, even though I'd dragged him here specifically to witness this, I genuinely wished he didn't have to hurt like this. Why did you bring me here? He asked, and there was accusation in his voice now, anger mixing with his grief. Why did you make me watch that? You could have just showed me the papers at home. And there it was, the consequence of my need for public justice. Because she was never going to admit the truth otherwise, I said, but even as I spoke, I could hear how thin it sounded. Because she'd already convinced you I was lying, and I needed you to see that I wasn't. You humiliated her, Ethan said flatly. In front of everyone she works with, you made her cry and run away. Was that really necessary? I felt my defenses rising, that familiar spike of anger when someone questioned my methods. Was it necessary for her to steal your future? Was it necessary for her to call me a liar to your face? I didn't do anything except show the truth. You chose to do it here like this in public. That was your choice. Don't act like you had no control over how this went down. Ethan's voice was getting stronger, and I realized he sounded older suddenly, like this moment had aged him. You always do this, Grandma. Dad's right. You can't just let things be handled quietly. You have to make everything into a big dramatic thing where you're the hero and everyone else is the villain. His words hit harder than Vanessa's theft had, maybe because part of me knew they were true. I'm not trying to be a hero, I just wanted you to know the truth. No, you wanted her to suffer, Ethan said, and his honesty was brutal. You wanted everyone to see what she did and judge her for it. And yeah, what she did was wrong, really wrong, but this. He gestured around the lobby where people were still staring at us. This is wrong too. I opened my mouth to argue, to defend myself, to explain that public accountability matters and that people like Vanessa only change when they face real consequences, but Ethan was already walking away. "I need to go find my mom," he said without looking back. "She's probably in her car freaking out." I watched him leave, and I couldn't shake the feeling that in winning this battle, I'd somehow lost something more important. Marisol was still standing beside me, tactfully giving me space but clearly waiting to continue our conversation. "Mrs. Hartwell, I know this was difficult, but you did the right thing bringing this to light. We take ethical violations very seriously here, and if Vanessa was misusing funds, that's something we needed to know." The validation felt empty somehow. "Thank you," I managed to say, gathering my remaining papers and putting them back in the folder with hands that had started shaking again. Over the next few days, the consequences unfolded like dominoes falling. The clinic formally suspended Vanessa pending their internal investigation, even though she'd quit. Marisol apparently reported the incident to some kind of wellness industry ethics board, which meant Vanessa's reputation in her field was severely damaged. The story spread through social media, probably shared by the clinic employees who'd witnessed the confrontation, and suddenly Vanessa was the subject of local gossip and judgment. I filed a police report for theft and started legal proceedings to recover the money. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Rebecca who specialized in family financial disputes, was optimistic about our chances. "With this kind of documentation, a judge will almost certainly rule in your favor. She may be ordered to repay the full amount plus interest, and potentially face criminal charges depending on how the prosecutor feels about it." But the money wasn't the hard part. The hard part was my family falling apart in the aftermath. Daniel called me 3 days after the clinic confrontation, and his voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. "Mom, what you did was unforgivable. You destroyed Vanessa's career, you humiliated her publicly, and for what? To prove you were right." "She stole from Ethan," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "She stole from your son, Daniel, almost $50,000 that I spent 14 years saving. How can you defend that?" "I'm not defending what she did," he shot back. "What she did was wrong, really wrong, and we're dealing with that. But you didn't have to go nuclear. You didn't have to make a scene at her workplace in front of her coworkers. You could have come to us privately, and we could have worked out a payment plan, gotten her help, handled this like a family instead of like enemies." "I tried the private route, Daniel. I showed Ethan the bank's statements, and he'd already been told not to believe me. Your wife poisoned him against me before I even had a chance to explain. She was never going to admit what she'd done if I hadn't forced the issue. So you forced it by destroying her reputation and her career. Do you have any idea what this has done to her mentally? She's been having panic attacks, she can't sleep, she's talking about how her life is over. And Ethan is caught in the middle, watching his mother fall apart and his grandmother acting like some kind of avenging angel. You've traumatized them both." The accusation strung because it had truth in it, but I wasn't ready to admit that yet. I'm supposed to feel bad that she's facing consequences for her actions. She made choices, Daniel. She chose to steal. She chose to lie. I just exposed the truth. "You chose to do it in the most damaging way possible," Daniel said, and I could hear the disappointment in his voice. "And you know what the worst part is? You're not even sorry. You think you were completely justified, don't you? You think because she did something wrong, that gives you the right to destroy her however you see fit." "I think," I said slowly, feeling my temper starting to rise again, "that I have a right to defend myself and to make sure my grandson knows I didn't lie to him. And if that makes me a bad person in your eyes, then I guess I'll have to live with that." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Daniel said, "I need some space from you, Mom. I can't be around you right now. Don't call me, don't try to visit, just leave us alone while we figure out how to put our family back together after you blew it up." He hung up before I could respond, and I sat in my living room staring at my phone, feeling the weight of what I'd done settling onto my shoulders like a physical thing. Was he right? Had I gone too far? I kept replaying the confrontation in my mind, seeing Vanessa's face crumble, hearing Ethan's accusation that I'd humiliated her on purpose, remembering how Daniel said I'd traumatized them both. But then I'd remember the bank's statements, the stolen money, the lies she'd told, and my anger would flare up again, justifying everything. A week later, I got a letter from the bank. The investigation I'd requested had uncovered something unexpected. The account authorization logs showed that Vanessa had indeed made the withdrawals, but there was a second authorization signature on file that had approved her access in the first place. The account had been set up to require 2 family member authorizations for large withdrawals, a security feature I'd added years ago and then forgotten about. And the second signature, the one that had given Vanessa permission to access the funds, belonged to Daniel. I read that line 5 times, sure I was misunderstanding, but there it was in black and white. My son had authorized his wife to access Ethan's college fund. The withdrawals weren't just Vanessa acting alone. Daniel had known about it, had approved it, maybe had even been part of planning it. The realization made me physically sick. I ran to the bathroom and threw up, my hands gripping the cold porcelain of the toilet as everything I thought I knew shifted beneath me. Had they planned this together? Had Daniel known the whole time that Vanessa was going to spend that money on luxury vacations and new furniture? Or had she manipulated him somehow, lied to him about what she needed the money for? I needed to know, needed to understand how deep this betrayal went, so I did what I always do. I dug deeper. I requested more detailed authorization logs, I cross-referenced dates, I built a timeline of exactly when Daniel had signed the authorization forms. What I found was somehow worse than if he'd been an active participant in the theft. Daniel had authorized Vanessa's access to the account 3 years ago, long before any withdrawals happened. According to the notes I found in my own files, he'd called me asking about the college fund, saying they want to make sure they could access it easily when Ethan started looking at colleges. I'd thought it was responsible planning. I'd added Vanessa as an authorized user and had Daniel sign the forms allowing her access. I'd trusted them both. So Daniel probably didn't know Vanessa was going to empty the account. He'd just given her the access she needed, and then she'd used it without telling him. But that raised new questions. Did he know now? Had Vanessa told him what she'd done? When I'd confronted her at the clinic, when I'd showed Ethan the evidence, had Daniel already known his wife had stolen the money? And if he had known, why had he let her tell Ethan that I was lying? I called Daniel even though he'd told me not to. He didn't answer, which wasn't surprising. I left a voicemail, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. Daniel, I got the bank records. Your signature is on the authorization forms that let Vanessa access the college fund. Did you know she was going to empty it? Did you know and let her convince Ethan I was lying? Call me back. We need to talk about this. He didn't call back that day, or the next, or the day after that. A week of silence stretched into 2, and I felt myself spiraling into familiar patterns. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, spent my days obsessively checking my phone and my nights reviewing the evidence over and over, trying to find more answers in numbers and dates that had already told me everything they could. This is what I do when I feel wronged, when I sense injustice. I dive into it completely, let it consume me until I can't think about anything else. My therapist had warned me about this years ago, had told me that my need for resolution and justice could become unhealthy, could damage relationships and hurt my own well-being. I dismissed her concerns then, but sitting alone in my house with my son refusing to speak to me and my grandson probably hatting me, I wondered if she'd been right. Finally, Daniel showed up at my door unannounced on a Tuesday evening. He looked terrible, like he hadn't been sleeping either, with dark circles under his eyes and his clothes wrinkled. "We need to talk," he said without preamble, and I let him in, my heart pounding. We sat at the same kitchen table where I'd shown Ethan the bank statements, and the irony wasn't lost on either of us. Daniel put his head in his hands for a long moment before speaking. "I didn't know, Mom. I swear to God, I didn't know what Vanessa had done until you confronted her at the clinic." "But you'd given her access to the account," I said, trying to keep the accusation out of my voice and failing. 3 years ago, yeah, because we thought it would make things easier when Ethan started applying to colleges. We were being responsible, or at least I thought we were. I never imagined she'd just take all the money without telling anyone. "When did you find out?" Daniel's face crumpled slightly. "The day before you showed up at her work. Ethan came home from your house upset, told me you'd showed him bank statements claiming there was a college fund, but that Mom said you were lying. I asked Vanessa what was going on, and at first she stuck to the lie, said you were making things up. But I pushed her, demanded to see our own bank records, and eventually she admitted she'd taken the money." "And you didn't tell me, you let her keep lying to Ethan." I was trying to figure out what to do. Daniel's voice rose, frustration evident. I was trying to understand how my wife could do something like that, trying to figure out if our marriage could survive it, trying to protect Ethan from being more hurt than he already was. And then you showed up at Vanessa's workplace with your folder of evidence and blew everything up before I had a chance to process any of it. So I should have just waited. My voice dripped with sarcasm, and I could feel us falling into our old patterns, the same arguments we'd had when he was a teenager, and I thought I knew better than him about everything. Waited while Vanessa kept telling Ethan I was a liar. Waited while she spent my years of saving on spa treatments and designer bags. "You should have come to me first," Daniel shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "You should have shown me the evidence and let me handle it with my wife privately instead of immediately going nuclear and destroying her in public. Like you were handling it so well when you knew about it and didn't tell me." "I knew for one day, Mom, one day before you showed up at her workplace. I was planning to call you that evening, to admit what happened and talk about how to fix it, but you didn't give me a chance." The revelation stopped me cold. He'd been planning to call me, he'd been planning to make this right. and I'd been so consumed with my need for immediate justice, so convinced that everyone was lying and only I could expose the truth, that I'd never even considered giving him the chance. "You were going to call me?" I asked, my voice smaller now. "Yes, because despite what you apparently think of me, I'm not okay with what Vanessa did. I'm furious about it. We've barely spoken since it happened. I've been staying at a friend's place while I figure out if I even want to stay married to someone who could lie to our son and steal from his future. But you didn't give me the space to deal with that because you had to be right immediately and publicly." I felt tears pricking at my eyes, which surprised me because I'm not much of a crier. She told Ethan I was lying. She poisoned him against me before he could hear the truth. How was I supposed to just let that go? "By trusting me to be a good father and handle it," Daniel's voice broke slightly. "By believing that I love my son and would make sure he knew the truth eventually. But you've never trusted me to do anything right, have you? You've always assumed I'd screw it up, that I'd pick Vanessa over Ethan, that I'd let lies stand because I'm too weak or too stupid to deal with hard truths." His words hit like physical blows because they echoed Ethan's accusations and my own late-night fears. Was that who I'd become? Someone so convinced of her own righteousness that she couldn't trust anyone else to do the right thing? "That's not fair," I said weakly. "Isn't it? Think about it, Mom. Think about every conflict we've ever had. You always have to be the one to fix things, to expose wrongdoing, to make sure justice is served. You can't ever just step back and trust other people to handle their own problems. And when they don't handle it exactly the way you think they should, you swoop in and take over, and then you're shocked when people are angry with you instead of grateful." I wanted to argue to defend myself, but sitting there in my kitchen with my son's pained face across from me, I couldn't find the words. Because he wasn't entirely wrong. How many friendships had I damaged over the years by being too aggressive in my pursuit of truth? How many family gatherings had become battlegrounds because I couldn't let a perceived slight or deception go unaddressed? My late husband had loved me despite this tendency, had learned to redirect me when I was getting too fixated on being right, but since his death, there'd been no one to pull me back from the edge. "I just wanted Ethan to know I didn't lie to him," I said, and my voice sounded tired even to my own ears. I couldn't stand the thought of him believing I'd made empty promises. "And now he knows the truth," Daniel said. "But he also saw you humiliate his mother in public, saw you prioritize your need to be proven right over his emotional well-being, and he doesn't know how to reconcile the grandmother who saved for his future with the grandmother who made his mother cry in front of strangers. You've confused him and hurt him in your rush to clear your own name." The truth of it settled over me like a heavy blanket. I'd gotten what I wanted, vindication and exposure and consequences for Vanessa, but the cost had been higher than I'd anticipated. "What do I do now?" I asked, and I genuinely didn't know. Daniel sighed, some of the anger leaving his shoulders. "You start by admitting you went too far. Not that you were wrong about what Vanessa did, because that was theft and lying and completely unacceptable, but that the way you handled it, the public confrontation, the deliberate humiliation, that wasn't about justice. That was about revenge, and you need to own that." Revenge, the word strung because it was accurate. I'd wanted Vanessa to suffer. I'd wanted her to feel the shame and pain that I'd felt when Ethan called me a liar. I'd wanted public accountability because private acknowledgement wouldn't have satisfied this burning need inside me to see her face consequences. "Okay," I said quietly. "I went too far. I let my anger control me instead of thinking about what was best for Ethan." "That's a start," Daniel said. "Now you need to figure out how to repair your relationship with Ethan, because right now he's really confused about who you are and whether he can trust you." "What about Vanessa, the legal proceedings, the money?" Daniel's face hardened slightly. "The legal stuff goes forward. She needs to pay back what she took, and if there are professional consequences, she brought those on herself by her actions. But Mom, going forward, you let the lawyers and the courts handle it. You don't show up at our house with more evidence. You don't post about this on social media. You don't make any more public scenes. You've made your point. Now you have to let the process work without your direct involvement." It went against every instinct I had, this idea of stepping back and letting others handle something that affected me so directly. But looking at my son's exhausted face, seeing the damage my need for control had caused, I nodded. "I can do that, or at least I can try." We talked for another hour, not about the money or Vanessa, but about us, about the patterns we'd fallen into over the years, about my tendency to steamroll over boundaries in my pursuit of justice and his tendency to avoid confrontation until things exploded. It wasn't comfortable, and there were moments where we both got defensive and angry again, but by the time Daniel left, something had shifted between us. Not fixed, not healed, but maybe the beginning of understanding. The legal proceedings took months, and staying out of them directly was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. My lawyer would call with updates, would ask if I wanted to provide additional evidence or testimony, and every fiber of my being wanted to say yes, wanted to be actively involved in making sure Vanessa faced full consequences. But I'd promised Daniel I'd step back, so I gave Rebecca everything she needed up front, and then forced myself to trust her to handle the rest. Vanessa fought the repayment initially, claiming the money had been a gift or a loan depending on which argument her lawyer thought would work better. But the evidence was overwhelming, and eventually her lawyer advised her to settle. She was ordered to repay the full amount plus interest and legal fees over a structured payment plan. The criminal charges were dropped in exchange for her cooperation and agreement to repay, which honestly disappointed me until I remembered my promise to let the process work without demanding maximum punishment. The professional fallout was severe. The Wellness Industry Ethics Board found her in violation of their standards, and her reputation was damaged enough that finding another job in her field proved nearly impossible. Last I heard, she was working retail, a massive step down from her regional manager position. Part of me felt vindicated by this. Part of me felt guilty for feeling vindicated. And a small part of me, the part I tried not to listen to, felt satisfied by her suffering in a way that probably said terrible things about who I am as a person. Rebuilding my relationship with Ethan was slow and painful. At first, he didn't want to see me at all, communicating only through Daniel when necessary. But gradually, with therapy and time, he started accepting short visits. We didn't talk about the college fund or what happened at the clinic. Instead, we played video games, watched movies, did normal grandparent-grandchild activities. Slowly, over months, I felt him start to trust me again, though something had changed between us. There was a wariness now, a knowledge that I was capable of going to extremes that made him careful around me in a way he'd never been before. One evening, about 6 months after the confrontation, Ethan and I were sitting in my living room after dinner, and he suddenly said, "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart," I said, bracing myself because I could tell from his tone this was going to be difficult. "Do you regret how you handled everything with Mom?" I'd known this question was coming eventually, had rehearsed different answers in my head, but sitting there facing his earnest 14-year-old face, I decided to be honest. "I regret making you watch it happen," I said carefully. "I regret doing it publicly in a way that was designed to humiliate your mother. I don't regret making sure you knew the truth, but I regret the way I went about it. Does that make sense?" Ethan nodded slowly. "Dad says you have a hard time letting things go when you feel wronged." "He's right, I do. It's one of my worst qualities, this need to prove I'm right and make sure everyone else knows it too. And sometimes that quality helps, like when I was an accountant and found errors that saved companies money, but sometimes it hurts people, like what happened with your mom." "She did steal the money though," Ethan said quietly. "That part wasn't your fault." "No, but how I responded to it was my choice. And I chose revenge over wisdom. I chose vindication over your well-being. That's on me, not your mom." We sat in silence for a while after that, and I wondered if I'd said too much or not enough. Then Ethan said, "Thank you for saving all that money for me. Even though everything got messed up, I know you did it because you love me." I had to work hard not to cry at that. I do love you, more than anything, and I promise I'm trying to be better about controlling my temper and my need to be right all the time. "Are you seeing a therapist?" he asked, and I was surprised by his directness. "I am, actually, twice a week. She's helping me understand why I react the way I do and giving me better tools for handling conflict." Ethan smiled slightly. "Good, because I don't want to lose you, Grandma, but I also can't have you blowing up my life every time someone does something wrong." His honesty was brutal but fair. "I understand, and I'm working on it, I promise." A year after the confrontation, the college fund was nearly restored. Vanessa's monthly payments, combined with some money Daniel had contributed from his own savings, had brought the account back to almost its original balance. Ethan would have his college money after all, though the path to get there had been far messier than I'd ever imagined. Our relationship with Daniel had improved but remained complicated. We talked regularly now, had family dinners once a month, but there was a boundary between us that hadn't existed before. He was careful about what he shared with me, particularly anything involving Vanessa or their marriage. I'd asked once if they were still together, and he'd said they were trying to work things out, but that it was difficult. I'd respected his privacy and not pushed for details, which for me was significant growth. The twist I hadn't seen coming happened on a random Tuesday, when I was reviewing the final account statements, before the fund would be transferred fully back into the college savings account. I noticed something odd in the authorization logs, something I'd missed before in my initial rage-fueled investigation. There were actually 3 people with authorized access to the account, not 2. The third signature was from years ago, someone I'd added when the account was first created in case something happened to me and Ethan needed access before he turned 18. My late husband's signature was still on file, even though he'd passed away 8 years ago, and the bank should have removed his access. But more concerning was that there had been 2 small transfers made using his authorization code just months before the large withdrawals started. Small enough that they hadn't triggered any alerts, but large enough that someone had been testing the system, seeing if those old credentials still worked. I called the bank immediately, my hands shaking as I explained what I'd found. The representative, a different person than I'd dealt with before, pulled up the detailed logs and confirmed what I'd feared. Someone had been using my dead husband's authorization to access the account. The transfers had been made from an IP address that, after further investigation, was traced to a computer at Vanessa and Daniel's house. But the timing of those test transfers was before Vanessa had made her large withdrawals. Someone had been checking if they could access the account using those old credentials, and when they confirmed they could, they'd found another way to take the money. I stared at the evidence, feeling my world tilt again. Someone in that house had known about the old authorization codes. Someone had tested them before the theft happened, and suddenly, I wasn't sure if Vanessa had acted alone after all, or if someone had been helping her, guiding her, maybe even planning the whole thing with her. The thought that Daniel might have been more involved than he'd claimed made me physically ill, but I'd promised to step back to let things be, and I'd worked so hard to rebuild our relationship, to control my need for immediate confrontation and public exposure. I sat in my living room with these new revelations, feeling the familiar fire building in my chest, that burning need to investigate further, to know the whole truth no matter what it cost me. And I had to make a choice. Chase this new lead, potentially destroy what little family connection I had left, prove I'd learned nothing from the last year of therapy and reflection. Or let it go, live with the uncertainty, trust that maybe this was an old logging error or a technical glitch rather than evidence of a deeper conspiracy. I picked up my phone to call Rebecca, my lawyer, then set it down. Picked it up again. Set it down. The battle between my need for truth and my desire to preserve my family raged inside me for hours. This is who I am. This war between wisdom and vindication, between letting go and holding on, between protecting relationships and pursuing justice at any cost. In the end, I made a different call. I called my therapist and scheduled an emergency session. And in her office, I laid out the new evidence and asked the question that terrified me most. If I investigate this further and find out my son was more involved in the theft than he admitted, will I be able to forgive myself for destroying our relationship again? Or am I using my need for truth as an excuse to avoid accepting that some things are better left unknown? She didn't tell me what to do, therapists never do, but she helped me see that this choice would define what kind of person I wanted to become. Someone who prioritized being right over being connected, or someone who could live with uncertainty if it meant preserving love. I still have the evidence. It sits in a folder in my desk drawer, and some days I take it out and look at it, feeling that familiar pull toward investigation and exposure, but I haven't acted on it, haven't confronted Daniel with my suspicions, haven't hired a private investigator to dig deeper, because I'm trying, genuinely trying, to be better than my worst impulses. Ethan starts looking at colleges next year. The money is there for him, restored and waiting. My relationship with him is healing, slowly but surely, and I'm learning, painfully and imperfectly, that sometimes the cost of being right is higher than I'm willing to pay. Whether that makes me weak or wise, I honestly don't know, but it makes me someone my grandson can trust, someone my son can talk to, someone who's trying to break destructive patterns even when every instinct screams to do otherwise. And maybe that's enough, or at least it has to be, because the alternative is a truth that might vindicate me but leave me completely alone.